So I was sitting around and I was asking myself, just how brutal was Christ's punishment, right? Just how brutal was the punishment he underwent when he suffered for us, for our sake, to pardon the sins of man. And so God reminded me of Isaiah 52:14, which reads, just as many were astonished over you, so much was a disfigurement from man, his appearance and his form from sons of mankind. So what is the verse telling us? This verse is telling us that his physical state was so out of what anybody had seen before. That's how disfigured it was. Think about that. His state was so disfigured, it was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It was unlike the children of mankind, which means the human race. It was unlike what the human race had seen at any particular point in time. He was that disfigured. He hardly resembled a human. And so that got me thinking, right? Like, what could possibly have that looked like? And what I came up with, right, is that it has to be some sort of where bones they're just bones, right? Like, if you're hardly recognizable as a human, it takes a lot, because it's pretty easy to recognize a human being as a human being. And so the movies don't do justice. I firmly believe the movies don't do justice. I stay away from biblical movies because they usually add things that aren't there. They usually tell you things that aren't there, right? And they usually twist the language or the dialogue. For what reason, I have no idea. Because it's in there. All you do is just follow what the book tells you, right? As the situation, as the altercation, as the dialogue went. But that's a story for another day. Nonetheless, it puts into perspective just how the brutality that Christ underwent for us. All he asks of us is to do what? To believe in him. Belief comes from hope, which comes from love. Love is the genesis. That's why Paul tells you in 1 Corinthians 13:13, love is the greatest of all. Faith, hope, and love exist forever. But love is the greatest. Why? Because it's the genesis. It is the reason of anything righteous. The reason anything righteous takes place is because of love. And he loved us so much, as this verse tells you, Isaiah 52:14 tells you what? He was so disfigured, hardly resembling a human. That is the closest thing that we get into perspective as to what he looked like undergoing it. Like, he was hardly recognizable. I don't think people understand that. They might have used what? What do you call those things? The whips might have had some teeth to it, in which they just whip you, probably just attach the teeth to the flesh, probably just rip it out. That's probably it's probably what he went through. And it probably just kept whipping him, ripping out flesh, where he probably just saw bones. Stand in the mirror at yourself naked and just look at your body and say, imagine that, me from head to toe, hardly recognizable, as if I wasn't even a human. He was that disfigured. He did that for us, and all he asks of us is to believe in him. And we can't do that. We can't do. That's why he did what he did, because we can't do it. We can't measure up to the law. We can't do it. But through him we can. We're made perfect in him. That's the beauty of it all. And it saddens my heart, and I hope it saddens anybody else's heart that is of this faith, right? That he did that, and we can't. We can't. You know what I'm saying? We can never do that. We can't measure it. We just can't. That's the beauty of it all. At the end of the day, it's the beauty of it all. That's what makes it all work. We just can't do that. We don't understand it either. We think we do, but we don't. I thought I did until I read this. And it's just I understand a little bit more. I still probably won't ever fully understand. I would have had to have seen it to get a full grasp of it, to understand it fully. But through words, it's the closest thing we get to knowing what he underwent, just how brutal the punishment was, because you couldn't even distinguish him as a being. You sit there and say, that's a human, and be like, no, that's not a human. Oh no, it is. It's the King of the Jews. It's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Right? That's him. You wouldn't even believe it if you saw it. I wouldn't believe it if I saw it. No one would. But that's what he did. That's what he went through for us. Why? Love. Because he loved us. Romans 5:8. He died for us while we were still sinners. While we were still bathing in iniquity, he still loved us. How many people can love evil doers? Without him, no one. He did that. And he continues what? To be the living sacrifice. All we have to do is put our faith in him and live out a life congruent to his teachings. He did that. We'll never do anything like that. The least we can do is die in sin, is to die. Cast away sin, right? And go seek him. Go seek his grace, his love, the joy he has, the peace he'll bring to us. That's all we can seek. Because, nothing we can do tops that. That's glorious. That's magisterial. That's beautiful. Love. That's love. He loved us before we loved him. Always remember that. He loved us before we loved him. Anything we do can be justified through just what we do, because it will never measure up. We can never measure up. He can, he did, so that we can do what? We can put our faith in him and be made perfect in him, so that we may be reconnected and reconciled with the Father.